Hey everyone, it's Lucy, the producer of Deadly Debbie's Creepy Files. I hope you guys are doing well. Before we get started with this week's episode, I just wanted to let you guys know about another paranormal podcast that I have been obsessively listening to the last few weeks, and I know you guys will love it too. It's called State of Fear. It's hosted by two guys from the States, Chris and James. And each episode, they talk about scary, unusual, and really disturbing stories that have occurred throughout the history of the United States. So it has really creepy tales ranging from aliens to werewolves to cannibals to serial killers. And these tales will pique your curiosity and send chills down your spine. I've become obsessed with it. I know you will too. It really does creep me out, but in a really good way. So here's their trailer.
This is Chris and James from State of Fear Podcast. When you find a new podcast that covers the areas of supernatural, the paranormal, or true crime, are you often disappointed to find that it covers the same subjects you've heard about again and again?
Yeah, when it comes to the world of podcasting, do you really think you've heard it all? Probably, but not here.
Every Friday, we go from state to state to uncover unusual or horrifying stories that often tend to fly under the radar of those other podcasts. What stories, you might ask? Well, have you ever heard of Iowa's exorcism of Emma Schmidt? Or the murder of 13-year-old Bruce Kim in Washington? How about the strange deaths at Hobbs Reservoir in northern Utah? Or South Dakota's duct tape killer?
That's not enough for you? How about the South Carolina Third Eye Man? Oklahoma's Abominable Chicken Man? What about the Devil Monkeys in New Hampshire? Or the Rougarou of Louisiana? Well, we've covered all of these and much more, and this was just the first season.
So, is your morbid curiosity piqued? Well, follow us anywhere you get your podcast to hear all about the lesser known, but just as frightening tales of murderers, demonic possessions, and silver-suited chicken eaters that you never ever knew existed.
State of Fear Podcast, where terror is homegrown.
Good evening, kiddies, and welcome to another special Phone Debbie episode. On tonight's show, I'll be talking to three people who all have had extraordinarily and particularly creepy experiences with the unexplained. First up, we have Lindsay from Los Angeles, who is going to share with us some of her creepy experiences when waking in the night. Oh, here she is now. Well, hello, Lindsay, darling. Please do share your stories.
Hi, Debbie. All right, so here's my stories. I've got a few. They're very small stories. So the first one was, it happened when I think I was 9, and my parents used to work at a place with people with learning disabilities. And it was like a huge school type thing, and once a month they used to hold these humongous parties, and they were so much fun, and it was just joyful like occasions. And I would be part of the party, but then I would go off by myself and just like explore the school in the area. And I remember being in the toilets one time, and there were all these cubicles, probably like 6 or 7 cubicles, and bathrooms are, they're terrifying anyway when you're in them by yourself at night. But I just went into a cubicle and I just started bawling my eyes out, like uncontrollably. Have no idea like what triggered it. Well, it was, so basically I was yearning for my dad's mother, my grandmother, who we only ever saw once every 6 months. We lived in Essex. She lived in Slough, far away. And she was super old. So even when we did see her in the nursing home, it wasn't really like, I don't know, very interactive. And so when we did see her, it wasn't really like, great, you know, not trying to be mean to my nan. And And so, but I was in this cubicle, bawling my eyes out, just wanting her. So I go upstairs back to the party, and I sit on my dad's lap, and I'm crying, and my mum and dad are like, what's wrong? What happened? And then I tell them, I'm just like, I really just want to see Nan right now. And then they're just like, okay, Lindsay, calm down. Calm down. Calm down. We're at a party. So I finally calm down. It does take me a while to calm down because I just remember being just so upset. We go home. The next morning, my mum comes into my bedroom like 6 a.m. and she's like, your Nan passed away last night. And it was just such a weird experience. And then I said to her, I was like, do you remember last night? She was like, yes, just don't speak about it. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was just such a weird, I've never really had anything like that happen since, but it was just a very strange experience. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre. Such a powerful, like, strong force in me that was just like, I need to see Nan. It was so nuts. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone, I mean, I'm sure you've had people on the show who've had sleep paralysis. So sleep paralysis, I've literally had it since I was a kid. But when it really started getting like really strong, it was when I was around 19. And I remember I was staying at my friend Faye's house, and I was staying in her sister Jodie's bedroom. And Jodie's room was so cool. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was like full of fairies everywhere. And it was just what I wanted my room to be like, even at 19. I love fairies. And I just remember falling asleep, and I was laying on my back. And then all of a sudden it just felt like someone was pushing so hard down on my chest. And it didn't help that Faye would tell me that her house was haunted. That didn't really help. This was 18 Devereux Road in Southend on Sea, everybody. Apparently that's haunted. So whoever lives there. So it just felt like someone was pushing really, really hard down on my chest. I couldn't move. Like, my whole body's completely numb. I can't move my face. I can move my eyes. But it feels like I can't breathe. And it felt like it was going on for ages. And then all of a sudden it stops, and you're just like, oh my God, did I dream that? And so it started out, like, from what I can remember, kind of like that. Then eventually it just got worse and worse and worse. And I remember it was actually when I moved to LA the first time I was at, and where I was staying with this woman, Sandy, in Sherman Oaks, and I had fallen asleep on the sofa. And as I was falling asleep, the same thing happens. And bear in mind, this has happened on and off through this time, but this is like just a big memory I have. Again, it feels like someone's like pushing down on my chest, pushing like weight all over my body. Physically cannot move. I'm trying to talk, and I can hear myself trying to talk, but it sounds like slurred. It sounds like I've had a stroke or something. And then all of a sudden, all these people, like the front door, because the sofa's by the front door opens. All these people, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people, like walking in and out. They're going to the kitchen. They're coming back through. They're turning the TV on. They're just like being so fucking loud. And I'm trying to be like, hey guys, I'm sleeping. You can see I'm sleeping. Because I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, rude. And this goes on. It feels like it goes on for about half an hour. And then all of a sudden I wake up and there's nothing there. There's nothing, like no sign of any like door opening or like whatever. And then Sandy eventually comes home, and I'm like, did you come home for lunch? And with some friends? And she's like, nope. And I'm like, are you sure? She's like, yep. And it felt like there were so many people surrounding me, like just talking, and it was so loud. It was just so like, just so bizarre. And then from that experience, I've had that exact same thing happen so many times, where it's the same thing. People are like surrounding me, talking as loud as they want to, opening, closing things. As soon as I wake up, it's like obviously like dead silence. But there's always one person at the very, very end of like wherever I'm sleeping, and it's always like a dark, shadowy figure. And it's just at the beginning, before like when this all started, it used to freak me the fuck out, like terrified me. And then as the years have gone on, because it would happen on the regular, it just kind of started to calm me down a little bit, because I was like, okay, it's going to happen. Okay, just let it ride its wave. But it's just, and then it's weird because like sometimes I'll have like somebody's voice right next to my ear, and it's so loud, and I'm just like, oh. So different things happen in each episode, but it's just like, and then sometimes I'll have that falling feeling on top of the chest, pressing down stuff. So it's like nothing's ever the same, but it's always very similar, and it's always fucking terrifying.
Ooh, fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Lindsay. I would say our listeners will be sleeping with the lights on from now on. Now, who's next? Ah, yes, we have Ian, who is going to share his very strange experience he had as a child.
So I grew up in a far out suburb outside of Louisville and Cincinnati, deep into Kentucky, and the neighborhood I lived in was on the edge of town. The neighborhood would grow up later, but at that time, my street stopped right into a forest. And this was the middle 90s, 95 or 96, when the first thing happened. When school was out for the day, I would take the bus home. And I'd be alone for a couple of hours until my parents came home. So I'd watch TV, reruns, MTV, whatever was on. It was that time in your life when being alone without adults around, it was all still new, but you still haven't outgrown some of your childhood fears. Like, what if there's something in the basement? What if someone comes to the door? It's that middle ground between childhood and maturity. So I would keep the basement door locked, and I didn't go down there unless someone else was home with me. But I don't want to give you the impression that I was always scared. I wasn't. But there were those eerie little moments of dread that would pop up from time to time. We didn't have a big house, but it wasn't small and cramped either. I had a key, so I came in through the front door when I got home from school. But my mom and dad would use the remote control garage door opener. And from the garage, you could walk straight into the kitchen. There was no wall between the living room or the kitchen, just a patch of roll-out linoleum next to a patch of carpet. The linoleum is the kitchen, the carpet is the living room. So from the couch, I can turn my head and I can see the entire kitchen, including the garage door. From the living room, there's a hallway that leads down to my room, my brother's room, and my parents' room. And of course, there's the basement door too. There's a reason that the basement made me uneasy like it did. And this is when the first thing happened. It was a few months after I started staying home alone after school. Around 5:30 or 6, my mom would get home. She usually got home before my dad. So like normal, I hear the garage door start to roll up. I hear the car pull in. The door opens and closes. And then my mom walks in the kitchen. She's got bags from the grocery store. She stops and asks me how my day was while she's putting down the bags, putting down her keys. And then she walks down into the basement. Only a couple seconds later, I hear the garage door roll up. I hear a car pull in. The door opens and closes. And then my mom walks in the kitchen door again. She puts down her bags on the table, and I'm looking at her like, I don't know what's happening, right? I look over, the basement door is closed. It's still locked, like nothing had ever happened. Nothing like that happened again for another year or so. But it seemed like it seemed like as soon as I'd had enough time to really let that one fall away and not bother me anymore, the same thing happened again. I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I hear my mom's car pull into the garage. She says hi and she marches on back to her bedroom to get out of her work clothes or whatever it was she did back there. And a couple seconds later, she walks in the kitchen door again. The third time happened 2 years later. I'm in high school now. This time she comes home. She goes through her normal routine. She walks down the hallway to her bedroom. And then it happens again. My mom comes into the kitchen again from the garage. But this time, when I look down the hallway, I look back, and the second one that came in was gone. My real mom was still back in the bedroom. I don't know what any of this was, but I imagine that when I turned my head to look down the hallway, whatever that was pretending to be my mom, that looked like my mom, I imagine she turned her head to me with some kind of terrible smirk. This is the image I see in my head. Like she knew that she'd really gotten me this time. Like coming in before my mom had gotten predictable. So now she was just changing it up a little bit. I still don't know what that was. And I never told my mom about it. Because the first time I wrote it off like some weird trick of the mind, right? But the second and third times, even though those were more concerning, right? One time you can play it off. Maybe I was asleep. Maybe I just imagined it. I don't know. But the second and third time, I grew up in a family that was really religious. And by that time, I was kind of falling away from all that. I stopped believing. And they knew it too. And in the 90s, where I grew up, when you stopped going to church, it meant that you were getting into trouble. And I wasn't, and none of that was ever really true, but that's just what people thought, right? So I never wanted to bring it up because they would think I was on drugs or something was going on. They'd think I'd become possessed or I was seeing demons, but I don't believe in any of that. I don't think it was a time slip. I don't believe it was a ghost. I don't think it was a demon. I think maybe there are things that we can't know. Things that we can't detect with our senses. Maybe you need different senses that we can't even imagine to see them. And maybe whatever they are, if they are, maybe they just learn that they can play with us and scare us and get a rise out of us. I don't know. But that's my story.
Well, thank you, Ian. My goodness, talk about a glitch in the Matrix. 2 mothers? Ha! 1 is more than enough for me. What are your thoughts, listeners? I would be interested to know what you think Ian experienced. And now we have Johnathan from last night's show, who is going to tell us about some frightening experiences he had in the middle of the night.
I would say a few weeks later, me and my girlfriend broke up. When we broke up, it was a very civil breakup. We were both fine. We talked it out. We both agreed it was for the best. And so I was on my own. And after that, for about 3 months, I would have reoccurring sleep paralysis. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I've come to find out that it's called sleep paralysis. And what that is you feel your body is in between sleep and being awake. And so your body just feels stiff, like you can't move, can't scream, can't talk. You might be able to move your head or look around, but everything just feels like you're being suffocated, like a weight's on your chest. Well, these sleep paralysis was happening a couple of times during the week. It started out maybe once or twice a week, and then it got to the point to where it happened 3 or 4 times a week, and sometimes on one night it would happen 2 or 3 times. And very few of those times is when I was able to actually look up and look around me. And those few times where I looked around, a few crazy things happened. The first thing I can remember happening was when I woke up in sleep paralysis. Like you feel like you're awake. Like everything just feels like you're awake. But I could feel my blankets like kind of falling off of me. And so I grabbed them with my hands and I start pulling on them. And I noticed that I'm struggling pulling these blankets back over me. And I'm pulling harder and harder. It's just not giving. And the blankets are getting pulled further and further off of me. And I finally looked down to see if maybe my feet were under the covers. But when I looked down, what I saw was these silhouette hands. It was just complete darkness. You couldn't see through these hands. You couldn't figure out any details. It just looked like just darkness. But you can tell that they were hands. And they were pulling these blankets off of me in a very almost playful, but at the same time it was almost taunting. I felt like it could have just pulled these blankets off me like it was nothing, but it was almost playing with me, trying to get the blankets off. And it finally did get the blankets off. All this happened within a few seconds. And after the blanket was off me, I just shut my eyes. I knew shutting my eyes wasn't going to do a thing, but I had to do something, and that felt like the safest thing to do in that moment. And as my eyes were closed, probably for about 5 minutes, I finally opened them, looked at the foot of my bed, and there was nothing there. The blankets were off of me, somewhere on the floor, and there was no hands. I couldn't see them. And so I crawled to the foot of my bed to see if I could see anything. And as I looked over my bed, there was nothing there. And so I tried to look under my bed. Also nothing there. And then I tried to look for my blanket, and I saw that my blanket was a good 1 to 2 feet away from my bed. Now, if the blanket just fell off my bed, they probably would have just fell right there at the foot of my bed. But for them to be a foot or 2 away from the bed freaked me out. I didn't know how that could have happened. And that was the first incident with sleep paralysis. The second one was a little more scarier, I think. I, once again, was asleep. And you can kind of tell when sleep paralysis is happening. You get this tingly feeling throughout your whole body. And I started to feel it. It was almost like white noise was in your body. When you look at a TV screen and there's white noise, what that looks like is what it feels like. When that was happening, I was able to move my head, and I was looking around the room to see what was going on, because when it happens, you don't know what's going on. You're just trying to figure out what's happening. Well, I looked to my bedroom door, and every night when I go to bed, I shut my bedroom door. But this time the door was wide open. And there was this kid standing in my doorway. This kid was just very pale. I could tell what this kid looked like. He was very pale. He was probably 6 or 7 years old. He had black hair with bangs that went to about the middle of his forehead. And this kid was just staring at me. And all he was wearing was shorts. But like his whole body was just pale and with black shorts on. And as he was just staring at me. But when you looked in his eyes, there was nothing there. It was complete darkness. And he opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. But you just saw darkness in his mouth, like it was just a deep hole that you didn't want to go down. And when he opened his mouth, I freaked out. And so I closed my eyes again, thinking it would go away. And when I finally opened my eyes again, I looked to my bedroom door, and it was closed. And I thought, okay, I was just dreaming. But I decided to go look at my alarm clock to see what time it was. And as I turned, that little boy, his face is right there next to my bed. And I screamed as loud as I could probably scream. But no sound came out of my mouth. I shut my eyes, and I probably scared myself to sleep or something, because I don't remember opening them again until the morning. And that incident was probably one of the scariest things I could remember when it came to sleep paralysis.
Well, thank you, Johnathan. I don't know about all of you, but I'm never gonna sleep again. Well, that's it for tonight's phone-in show, and I'll see you all next time. Sleep tight.